We created this problem one way or another, and we have a strong responsibility in trying to solve it. The Ukrainian existence depends on us. I know how to finish the war in Ukraine. I can finish the war in Ukraine in a couple of weeks, just by cutting the supply. If I cut the supply of arms to Ukraine, Ukraine cannot resist. They will have to surrender, and the war will finish. But is this the way we want the war finished? I don't want. And I hope that many people around Europe doesn't want neither.
This is my video update on this Saturday afternoon, May the 4th. Let's talk about some news. And that was Jungle Joseph Borrell saying, I know how to end the war in Ukraine. This can be done, Borrell said, in a couple of weeks. We just got to stop the supplies. But Borrell doesn't want to stop the war. And he hopes that many in Europe don't want to stop the war either. This is the top EU diplomat, the number one EU diplomat, talking about how he wants to keep the war in Ukraine going. Now, wasn't it Lindsey Graham who a year ago or a year and a half ago said that Ukraine will fight the Russians until the very last Ukrainian? I believe that was Senator Lindsey Graham. And now you have Jungle Joseph Borrell pretty much saying the same thing. Europe doesn't want the war to end, and Ukraine will fight the Russians until the last Ukrainian. Even though we know how to stop this war, we know how to stop the suffering and the destruction and the death. Nope. Nope, we don't want to stop this war, so keep on fighting Ukraine. Keep on fighting for the globalist political elite. That is what Jungle Joseph is saying in this statement. It's amazing that there are people in Europe, on the fringes of Europe, that want to be ruled by these psychos in Brussels. There are people that are actively protesting, violently protesting, getting out onto the streets in order to be ruled by people like Jungle Joseph Borrell, wanting to be ruled by people like Jungle Joseph Borrell. Absolutely amazing. It really shows you the power of propaganda and years, if not decades, of media conditioning. Oh, the number one diplomat in the European Union, Jungle Joseph Borrell, everybody. So Politico, they have an article with the title, After Ukraine Funding Win, Biden Shifts His Messaging Strategy. Foreign policy hands want the administration to keep pressing the case for supporting Ukraine, but election considerations are creeping in fast. So Politico interviewed a bunch of people in the Biden White House, and they are reporting that there are some people in the Biden White House who are telling Professor Biden, don't stop talking about Project Ukraine. But his campaign staff and many officials in and around Biden are telling him enough Project Ukraine talk. Stop talking about it. It's a loser on the campaign trail. Americans don't want to hear about Project Ukraine. Just say that you got the 61 billion approved. It's a huge foreign policy win, and leave it there. Start talking about U.S. domestic issues. Start talking about the economy, the success that is Bidenomics, and no more Project Ukraine talk. That is what Politico is reporting. Man, I bet you there are people in Brussels, in the European Union, and Zelensky's administration that are reading this article from Politico and freaking out. No doubt about it. They are freaking out as they are reading this article from Politico. Biden is tapping out of Project Ukraine, or at least that's what they're telling Biden to do. Distance yourself from Project Ukraine. So will Biden be able to distance himself from Project Ukraine? He's so personally, emotionally invested in Project Ukraine. Will he be able to stop talking about Ukraine? I don't know. I really don't know. He's been obsessed with Ukraine for 10, 15 years now. He's been obsessed with Ukraine, obsessed with Zelensky, intoxicated with the scent that is Zelensky number 5. I don't know if Biden will be able to shut up about Project Ukraine. I really don't. But his campaign team is telling him enough. No more Project Ukraine. So the UK Foreign Secretary, David Cameron, he said yesterday to Sky News that NATO troops in Ukraine is too dangerous. That is what David Cameron said. Speaking to Sky News on Friday, Cameron said the UK would keep supplying weapons to Kiev and focus on replenishing its own stocks as a national priority. Quote, but I wouldn't have NATO soldiers in the country because I think that could be a dangerous escalation. That is David Cameron speaking to Sky News. The same David Cameron who a month ago said that if Macron sends French troops to Ukraine, then the UK will follow France and send troops into Ukraine. This is the same Cameron who yesterday, according to Politico, one second, let me pull it up. According to Politico, Ukraine can strike inside Russia with British weapons. That is what Cameron said yesterday. And now he is going on Sky News and saying, nope, no NATO troops in Ukraine. That's too dangerous. I think someone in the Biden White House called up David Cameron and told him to tone it down on the World War III NATO in Ukraine talk. And the UK saying that, or at least today, saying that they will not send troops to Ukraine, NATO forces in Ukraine is too dangerous, that really messes up Macron's strategic ambiguity plan, doesn't it? Macron's flip-flopping strategic ambiguity plan, where Macron one day says France will send troops to Ukraine, and then the next day he flip-flops and says that France needs to speak with the Putin, his strategic ambiguity plan. If he doesn't have the UK backing him up, backing France up, then one part of Macron's flip-flopping strategic ambiguity plan kind of falls apart, doesn't it? Because Macron was betting on French troops going into Ukraine, those French troops being annihilated by the Russians, then British troops going to Ukraine, being annihilated by the Russians, and then running to the United States and begging the US to rescue the French and British troops. But without the British troops backing up the French troops, Macron's strategic ambiguity falls apart, doesn't it? It gets flushed down the toilet like the turd of a plan it was. Anyway, that is what Cameron said. And so this leaves the Zelensky regime without counting on NATO to intervene in Project Ukraine. This leaves the Zelensky regime with no other choice than to look for men, women, anybody inside Ukraine and outside Ukraine to send to the front lines. So Zelensky's BFF, Podolak, he said that the European Union must decide on sending Ukrainian men home. Podolak is telling the EU, you have to come up with a uniform policy, a uniform decision across the entirety of the European Union, because you have something like 850,000 Ukrainians living in the European Union, and you have to come up with a uniform policy and decision to start to send the Ukrainians living in the European Union back to Ukraine so they can get sent to the front lines. So they can register in the database and then get sent to the front lines. This is what Podolak said. We definitely need a uniform European decision on this issue. It looks odd that Ukraine is bleeding while young people have managed to leave and do not support their country, Podolak said. So I believe that the European Union will come up with a way. They'll find some sort of mechanism which will go against all kinds of international laws, but they're going to come up with a mechanism so that they can start to send Ukrainians living in the European Union back to Ukraine, identify them, and find ways to send them back to Ukraine so they could eventually be sent to the front lines. I believe the European Union will do that. And the Washington Post, they put out an article with the title, Ukrainian Men Abroad Voice Anger Over Pressure to Return Home to Fight. Ukrainian men abroad are under pressure as Kiev prepares to enforce a mobilization law aimed at conscripting desperately needed soldiers. Desperately needed soldiers. That's what the Washington Post is saying. You know, they are preparing. They are preparing all of the Ukrainians living in the European Union for what's about to come. That is what they are doing. Statements from Podolak. You had the Polish defense minister say that Poland has to start sending Ukrainians living in Poland back to Ukraine. You had the Lithuanian defense minister say the same thing. You now have the Washington Post coming out with this article talking about Ukrainians having to go back to Ukraine, fearful of being sent back to Ukraine. They're preparing everybody for what's about to come, which is the repatriation of Ukrainian men back to Ukraine to be sent to the front lines in order to do Jungle Joseph Borrell's bidding. Let's see, what does the Washington Post say? I feel like the country I love and cherish is behaving like an immature, offended teenager. Vali, a Ukrainian living in Poland, told the Washington Post, I have always positioned myself and will continue to position myself as a Ukrainian in all situations, he added. But if the state considers me a traitor, I must admit it's not a pleasant feeling for me at the moment. Kiev claims it does not seek to forcibly repatriate its nationals, but has requested assistance from its Western backers in encouraging returns. You cut off consulate embassy services, you cut off their banking services, and they're going to have no other choice but to go back to Ukraine. The majority are going to have no other choice but to go back to Ukraine. There will be some who will find ways to go to other countries to hide out, but a majority of Ukrainians living in Europe are going to have to go back to Ukraine. That's the way it's looking. I don't know what else to say. That's what everything is pointing towards, because as the Washington Post says, Ukraine desperately needs soldiers. That is what the Washington Post is saying. So yesterday there were ATACMS that were launched into Crimea. And from what I understand, the Russian air defenses, they intercepted the ATACMS that were targeting Crimea, but the Ukraine military, probably with the help of NATO, they are trying to hit Crimea and trying to hit the Kerch Bridge. They want to hit the Kerch Bridge during the first half of May, because you will have Putin's inauguration and then you will have May 9th Victory Day, and so they want to get to the Kerch Bridge during this first half of the month. And Maria Zakharova, she issued a very strong statement towards Ukraine and towards the collective West. Moscow warns the West of retaliatory blow. I would like to again warn Washington, London, Brussels that any aggressive actions against Crimea are not only doomed to failure, but will also be met with a retaliatory blow, Zakharova said. Moscow had earlier condemned British Foreign Secretary David Cameron's remarks, which he delivered while visiting Kiev, that Ukraine has the right to use weapons provided by London to strike targets on Russian territory. According to Zakharova, Kiev is now expecting the arrival of US-made F-16 fighter jets, which could be used to destroy the 11-mile, 18-kilometer road and rail bridge. That's an interesting statement from Zakharova, isn't it? Kiev is now expecting the arrival of US-made F-16 fighter jets, yes. We all expect the F-16 fighter jets to be delivered to Ukraine any day now. There are some analysts who are even saying that the F-16s have already arrived to Ukraine or are operating in Moldova or Romania. But Zakharova says that the F-16s could be used to destroy the 11-mile road and rail bridge, the Kerch Bridge. That's an interesting statement from Zakharova. So Shoigu, he said that Ukraine has suffered 111,000 losses since the beginning of the year, has actually surpassed 111,000 losses, troop losses, since the beginning of the year. Shoigu accused the U.S. and its allies of pressuring Kiev into disregarding the cost of continued fighting. As a result, Ukraine suffered 1,000 casualties daily throughout April, the minister claimed. And we are getting reports that the Russian military continues to advance. They're advancing very, very fast, it seems, in Chasov Yar, in the area west of Avdiivka. It definitely looks like the front line for the Ukraine military in the Donbass is collapsing, and collapsing very quickly. You had the director of national intelligence for the U.S., Avril Haines, say that the Russian military is about to break through Ukraine's defenses. China's assistance has tilted momentum on the battlefield in Moscow's favor in the conflict with Ukraine, according to U.S. Director of National Intelligence Avril Haines. Russian forces are steadily advancing in the Ukraine conflict, the U.S. Director of National Intelligence told senators on Tuesday. She also accused China of providing Russia with dual-use components, which has tilted the momentum on the battlefield in Moscow's favor. Yeah. They're preparing the narrative. They continue to prepare the narrative of Russia's victory due to China's intervention. That's how they're going to explain this. That's how they're going to explain the defeat in Ukraine, the collapse of Donbass. The weapons were delayed getting to the Zelensky regime, which is a bunch of bollocks, but they're going to say there was a 6-month weapons delay, and then China intervened, and that has tilted the momentum on the battlefield in Moscow's favor. That's a direct quote from Avril Haines. And they are preparing this narrative. They're saying this on a daily basis now, so that when people talk about Russia's victory in the collective West, when analysts talk about Russia's victory in the collective West, they're going to say, yeah, well, Russia was losing and we were reporting everything correctly over 2 years about Russia's loss and the washing machine chips and shovels and Putin's various diseases, but we delayed in getting weapons to Ukraine for 6 months, and then China, that damn China had to intervene. And that's why Russia won. So let's do a couple of more stories before we get to our clown world. This is from The Hill. University of Vermont cancels UN ambassador's address amid Gaza protests. The University of Vermont has canceled United Nations Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield's commencement speech amid pro-Palestinian protests on the campus as protests sweep colleges across the nation. So no commencement speech for you, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, a U.S. ambassador to the United Nations that has voted many, many times against resolutions calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. Let's do a couple of clown worlds and we'll wrap this video up. Let's see here. We have from the Express. Is this the Express UK? One second. A tweet from Lord Bebo. Breaking. Putin humiliated. The country flags on the country of origin on the NATO equipment were put there by Russians. Wow, this sounds like a huge scandal, a real humiliation for Russia and for Putin. What's going on here? Vladimir Putin humiliated as key feature of military parade revealed to be fake. Exclusive. Putin has been showcasing captured frontline tanks in Moscow for all to see, but his message may not be so powerful after all. My God. What's going on here? What is going on here? Let's investigate further. The vast array of Western military equipment comes ahead of Russia's annual celebration of the end of World War II. However, military experts have told expresscode.uk that one feature of the vehicles on display has been tinkered with between moving from battlefield to the showground. Oh my God. Each of the vehicles on display has various flags attached to them, denoting which country they belonged to. King's College London professor Michael Clark said this is not how these vehicles would have looked in the middle of combat. He said, I can be completely certain that no UK equipment that goes to Ukraine has a national flag on it, except that of Ukraine. We gifted them the stuff. Oh my God. This is a huge scandal. This is a huge scandal that Express Co. UK is reporting. The Russians are placing flags on the vehicles of the country of origin. That's not how they would have been in combat. That's not how they would have been on the front lines. Putin, misleading Russian citizens like that, deceiving Russian citizens like that who are going to this expo, this exhibition of trophy weapons, and they're seeing a UK flag on the Challenger tank or an American flag on the Abrams tank, and they're being led to believe that that flag placed on the Abrams tank was actually there when the Abrams tank was doing battle. There's a huge scandal, everybody. And this guy's right. What's his name? This Michael Clark, King's College London professor, Michael Clark is right. I can be completely certain that no UK equipment that goes to Ukraine has a national flag on it, except that of Ukraine. We gifted them the stuff, you see? You see, Russia doesn't understand how this works. Sorry, Russia just doesn't understand how this works. It's so infuriating. This really upsets me. It really makes me so mad. Because Annalena, she broke this all down a year ago when she said that when we give Leopard tanks to Ukraine, they're no longer German Leopard tanks. They're Ukraine Leopard tanks. So you know what this means? This means that all of the trophy weapons that are on display are Ukraine trophy weapons. They're not American, they're not US, they're not British, they're not German. Because Annalena, she made this very clear, Annalena 360. When Germany gives a Leopard to Ukraine, it stops being a German Leopard tank. It officially becomes a Ukrainian Leopard tank. Ooh, the deception. The deception from Russia. Wow. Thank God for media publications like Express Co. UK. Well done, gentlemen, for exposing this scandal. Mark Hamill, he made an appearance at the White House. He was a guest of the White House of Karine Jean-Pierre. Yes, Mark Hamill joined Karine Jean-Pierre. And he was wearing some very cool aviator glasses. And he addressed the media and said that the aviator glasses, this is Luke Skywalker, everybody. He said that the aviator glasses were a gift from none other than Joe Biden. And then Mark Hamill, this is Luke Skywalker, Mark Hamill started to talk about how Biden is the most successful president in his lifetime. That is what Mark Hamill said. And he said that when he spoke to Biden, he asked Professor Biden, "Can I call you Joebi Wan Kenobi?"
How many of you had Mark Hamill will lead the press briefing on your bingo card? Hands? Yeah, me either. And look, I just got to meet the president. He gave me these aviator glasses. Oh, yeah. I love the merch.
Can Biden bring up Star Wars too, sir?
Well, you know, I called him Mr. President. He said, "You can call me Joe." And I said, "Can I call you Joebi Wan Kenobi?" And he liked that.
Thank you, Mark Hamill, for another nickname for Joe Biden. Joebi Wan Kenobi. Can I call you Joebi Wan Kenobi? Because Biden, you are so Jedi, bro. You are so freaking Jedi. Oh boy. That's Luke Skywalker, everybody. And that is the video. theduran.locals.com. We are on Rumble, ODYSEE, BitChute, Rockfin, and Twitter X. I always get nervous walking in the grass here in Cyprus when it's this high because we do have quite a lot of snakes. It always worries me that a snake's going to come out and just chomp at my leg or something. Anyway, that's the video, everybody. Twitter X, and go to the Duran shop, pick up some limited edition merch. The link is in the description box down below. Take care.